welcome to all of our friends from all over the world. We have visitors from South Africa, Russia, India, of course, New York City, and also from other parts of the United States. We are very happy to host Juan Self for another talk in our season two of AWA Agora. Today is the sixth episode, and we are going to be talking with Juan about um, architecture as a catalyst for community. How does he in his work utilize architecture to create a sense of community or enhance a sense of belonging? He's a fantastic speaker. He's also the founding principal of Self+Tucker out of Memphis, Tennessee, with several notable projects completed over the last 26 years of being in practice since 1995. I have greatly appreciated his journey and how he has been, how he has established himself as one of the preeminent avant-garde architectural firms in the United States. I had the pleasure of meeting him at NOMA conference here in Brooklyn about 2 years ago, and we've stayed in touch, and I've obviously been following his work. And I'm sure all of you who are in the audience live today, and then those of you who are going to see this on YouTube when it's released in a week, would appreciate his research and his involvement in community affairs and how he utilizes his skill sets as an architect and his vision as an architect to embrace the whole concept of community. I will hand over the mic to Juan now.
Well, thank you so much, Abhay. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and to your audience and join in this conversation. Tell you a little bit about my journey as an architect. I grew up in the Mississippi Delta, small town, Clarksdale, Mississippi. We call it the heart of the Delta, where music, the blues in particular, and gospel music, rockabilly and other genres in that era. Really, that life of small town, Delta, and dealing with during the time I came up in terms of segregation on the tail ends of that in my lifetime, but the remnants and many of the vestiges of that have persisted, and recognizing that the one way that communities can come together is through shared values and shared vision of whatever place you're from. And growing up in Clarksdale, there was always a sense of community. It was to repeat a well-used phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. We certainly had that village, and the idea of community has been really baked into my entire psyche. I went to school at Howard University, and actually even before I left Clarksdale, I should say that had an opportunity to work in the construction realm, actually starting when I was 14 years old. That was my introduction to the built environment from the standpoint of actually constructing projects, and became interested in the design area, and was encouraged to study architecture. And so I went to Howard University, studied there, and stayed in the DC area for about 13 years before moving to Memphis in 1989. When I moved to Memphis, I was hired by the African-American firm McKissick & McKissick, who was based in Nashville at the time. And I opened a Memphis office for that firm in 1989 in Memphis. McKissick & McKissick is, at that time, was the oldest African-American architectural firm in continuous operation. They were, the firm started in 1905 and actually continues to this day. And the children and grandchildren have carried on that legacy for well over 100 years. And so it was certainly my privilege to work for that firm, and understanding that heritage and history connected there really gave me a lot of insight in terms of the sensitivity in my practice for particularly under-resourced communities, communities of color, et cetera, and focus a lot of our practice on community revitalization, community engagement, and community empowerment. I use the term empowerment architecture, and that is we seek to engage the community and provide the community with tools to take agency over their own neighborhoods. And so that's really the thrust of our practice today, preserving cultural assets, et cetera. And so that's just a little backstory about me.
That's fantastic.
And,
Thank you for sharing. Yeah. I have a quick question, Juan, connected to that. So when you were working in construction, when you were 14 years old, or getting your experience in around construction sites, was there any one individual that said, Juan, you got to go study architecture?
Oh, absolutely. His name is Freddie Caswell, deceased actually earlier this year.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And he became a mentor to me. He was African-American contractor. He was a teacher. He taught drafting at the local, what was then known as a junior college, now community colleges. He taught me how to draft, taught me the various symbols on, what we would refer to as blueprints. And he taught me design principles. And a lot of the work that we did was single family homes, rehabs, particularly in those under-resourced communities. He certainly was the singular influence on me in terms of pursuing the field of architecture.
That's fantastic. And you share your alma mater with our vice president now. And
yes.
I've also met in many conferences some really talented architects in serious leadership positions in many architectural firms around the country who are graduates of Harvard University. So could you share with us what was in the water of Harvard University, or in the food, or in the education that created so many design leaders in the United States?
Well, I think Howard University in whatever field of pursuit, particularly among African Americans, is really somewhat of the mecca of, or has been called the mecca of higher education for African Americans. And so the university itself and its reputation over the years historically has attracted some of the best minds, some of the best African American minds, and certainly the and not just Howard, but many HBCUs. That spirit of community is what I think sets HBCUs apart, and that there's a certain amount of nurturing, mentoring, et cetera. I kind of have a motto is that M, that is mentoring, equals EP squared. That's emerging professionals. That it kind of raises emerging professionals to an exponential power. And so I think that is what the secret sauce, if you will, is of HBCUs, and certainly Howard being one of the premier as well.
That's fantastic. I know you have a lot of slides to share with us, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from you the stories behind these projects. So whenever you're ready, maybe we can launch into your slides. Yeah.
Community is very important to me. It's again baked into my psyche. I think particularly recognizing the disparity of many communities in the United States, and here in Memphis where I live, and my hometown of Clarksville, Mississippi, is very important to me to help revitalize and help to redevelop communities. And with a certain sensitivity recognizing that we want those communities to be revitalized and not have the negative effects or stigma, if you will, of what we may call gentrification, so that those who are in the community who have a vested interest in that community are not displaced. And so approaching that and instilling that into our staff members, our team members, et cetera, I think helps us look at projects in a different way that perhaps other firms may not have considered. We have a diverse staff, about 18 to 20, and fortunately, we've been able to maintain our staff during this pandemic. And a part of what we do is to try to create a culture of community within our own staff members. My partner, Jimmy Tucker, and I, we stress mentoring our young people. We have a number of emerging professionals, new graduates, as well as those who have a wealth of knowledge and experience. I think our oldest person is actually in his 80s, and he has provided the wisdom, and he's kind of been an anchor for the firm over the years. He's been with us probably 20 of the 26 years. So we believe it's certainly in diversity and inclusion. We think that sensitivity across cultures helps to bring a mixed kind of an eclectic atmosphere, which we really cherish, and our team members really are the backbone of our firm. Each year we have a number of interns that work with us, or emerging professionals, I should say, and we're just committed to that and providing an opportunity. Particularly, we have been able to attract not only African Americans to our firm, but persons from all cultures, from India, from China, actually England, Puerto Rico, Mexico. So it's been a very interesting journey for me, and we've always had that rich mix of our staff persons bringing to bear their experiences and influence, ideas, etc., on our design. You heard enough about me, so I'll skip that guy right there in this slide. So one of the projects that I did want to share with you is the Harahan Bridge project. We've dubbed that project here in Memphis as the Big River Crossing. Memphis sits on a bluff on the east side of the Mississippi River, across from Arkansas. We actually have 4 bridges that cross the Mississippi River, 2 vehicular bridges and 2 rail bridges. One of the oldest is the Harahan Bridge, which is shown on the top left slide, and it's the leftmost bridge in that. These 3 bridges, the Harahan Bridge and the Frisco Bridge, are now rail, and the Memphis, Arkansas Bridge was originally constructed as for vehicular traffic. The Harahan Bridge, when it was designed and constructed, actually was a combination of a rail bridge for Burlington Northern Railway, and it also had 2 boardwalks, one on the north, one on the south, that were for eastbound and westbound vehicular traffic. And you can see that in the slide on the top right photograph. Mm-hmm. Once the Memphis, Arkansas Bridge was constructed, then of course no longer was vehicular travel conducted on the Harahan Bridge. And the 2 slides on the bottom just show the deterioration of the boardwalk where vehicles once traveled. So it was 1 lane, 1 way each way, one on the north side, one on the west side. And so the bottom left photograph is the northernmost boardwalk that we, the city of Memphis, along with the city of West Memphis, the state of Tennessee, and the state of Arkansas collaborated and submitted a joint proposal for a grant to create an intermodal pedestrian and bicycle path between the two cities. And it really is focusing on connecting communities. This particular project from the Memphis side is the end of probably a 10-year or longer journey in terms of Memphis converting railways to greenways, et cetera, and connecting the entire city together with bicycle and pedestrian paths as well, going to the eastern suburbs all the way to downtown, and then even across now the Mississippi River. It's actually the longest pedestrian span across the Mississippi River in the United States. One of the things that that's unique about this project was the level of community engagement from all aspects of our community, both from Arkansas and from Memphis, Tennessee. And I really think part of the success that we can attribute to this project is the fact that the community was engaged early. It was not a top-down type of project. It really was a grassroots type project. And I tell you, I use this is there are many projects that we do. There are a few that I return to for various reasons often. This is one that I return to very often, not only to get exercise, et cetera, but really to witness the number of people from varied parts of the, from various cultures, ages, et cetera. And when I say all ages, and it's really moving to me to be walking across this bridge and see an entire family where there may be a grandmother or grandfather, maybe on a walker, maybe on a cane, maybe in a wheelchair, maybe walking on their own, all the way down to a toddler on a tricycle, and from all cultures, from that Memphis is proud to have as our population, and it also connects. It crosses in a very real way the two cities, Memphis and West Memphis, and so and from this, a number of other projects have spun off. The state of Arkansas is developing a plan. Once you get to the Arkansas side, to develop the land for different trails between the two major bridges, which I think in this next view, you might see in the very distant, a pyramid-shaped building, and then another bridge to the left. But that land between those bridges, Arkansas is developing for trail paths and bike paths, et cetera. And then to the right, you'll see the city of Memphis in the background, and Tom Lee Park, this greenway there, is being redeveloped as well through the Memphis River Commission. And so this particular slide shows the marker between that actually is the border of Arkansas to the left and Tennessee to the right. And the view of the city is magnificent from this angle. And it's the span is about 1 mile. There's a long area of an incline, a rake going down toward the Arkansas Delta. This also is connecting to a longer vision, a long-term vision, to actually connect to the levee on the Arkansas side, as well as joining Louisiana, where you would actually now be able to bicycle or hike all the way from Memphis all the way to New Orleans. And so this was a major node in that connection. This is a view of the trailhead on the Arkansas side, and you can see the Santa Fe Bridge in the background. This area actually is multi-use for community. There are gatherings, various events on this trailhead as well. And so it really has become a real meeting point for the communities, not only of Memphis, but also of West Memphis. And so this is the Big River crossing. And if there are questions, certainly, and I'm going to go to another project in a moment. So if there are any questions regarding the Big River crossing, I certainly would entertain those now, or I'll continue, and then we can have more questions at the end.
Sure. We don't have any questions yet,
Okay.
But I have a question.
Certainly.
And I'm just very curious to, well, two aspects of it. One, big picture. Did you have a lot of community board kind of involvement from the local neighborhoods? And the second, the choice of these hemispheres, these half spheres that you're using as wayfinding, as also, I'm guessing, for traffic control. What was the inspiration in going with this shape? Because it's really compelling. I mean, it's just looking beautiful. So I'd love to hear from you on both those aspects, if you would like.
Certainly. Yeah, we certainly had many community meetings throughout this whole process. And one other aspect of the project that I did not mention, and that is the Harahan Bridge is actually on the National Register of Historic Places. And so, and I'm a very passionate preservationist, and a lot of the design was really brought, influenced by the original structure, but also we had to pay close attention to meet all of the Department of the Interior guidelines in terms of this new structure, and that it would, in this process. But community engagement really was key, because there had to be community buy-in across the board. From the city of Memphis in order to move the project ahead. And even dealing with the federal government, that was really one of their criteria. And so not only communication with the community, but also community buy-in. We must have had somewhere between 30 and 40 community meetings, small meetings across the city. And then larger meetings for the larger presentations, and so it is really a community project. Yeah. In terms of the hemispheres, it's really as you mentioned, it serves a number of purposes. One, of course, is wayfinding, and so you see the different color, the darker gray, and even in the concrete. Where those are, it also serves as somewhat of a barrier. This portion of the trailhead landing actually supports small vehicles, a small maintenance truck, and so that is to keep those. They serve somewhat as bollards, if you will. And then the third use of it, which is partly of the shape of it, is it's also seating as well. And so many people may jog across, walk across. There are a couple of shaded areas that you can see the canopy in the distance. And this particular photograph is taken from beneath the canopy in the foreground that's not visible. But that shape really is kind of reflective of the mound. You'll see a mound on the left of the photograph as well. And then the Native American culture used mounds, and there's a large, there's a Native American population here in Memphis, and various mounds in the Delta. And so it kind of reflected all of that wrapped up in one.
Got it. Well, thank you for sharing. Appreciate that.
Certainly. And then that's a view from the Memphis side, the bluff, and One interesting thing is actually once we finished the Big River Crossing, our main project, the Phillips Lighting, you certainly might be interested in that, actually provided a grant to the city to provide lighting for the superstructure as well. And so you see that the blue LEDs, which actually are programmable to any color and patterns, et cetera.
Right.
And they, and maybe a year or so after they did the Harahan Bridge, they also did the DeSoto Bridge. So we have two LED shows, if you will, from our bridges, one on the north side of the of town and one on the south. And so the Harahan Bridge, the superstructure itself, from the bed of the boardwalk is about 90 feet high at its highest point.
Got it.
And so this was opening day, and you see the fireworks in the background.
When was that? How many years ago?
I believe that was, wow, it's hard to keep up with the years now, but I think it was about 4 years ago. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's been an immense success. It's been an immense success. Yes.
It's beautiful.
Another project is near and dear to me for a number of reasons, and it is the Universal Life Insurance building. The building itself is Egyptian Revival, and it was originally designed by the firm that I worked for, McKissick & McKissick. Of course, I was not around when it was actually designed, so it was the design process and construction was from 1947 to 1949. The building was opened in the summer of 1949, and a year and a half ago, we celebrated the 70th year of the opening of this particular structure. The Universal Life Insurance Company itself was established in 1923 and ultimately had up to 700 employees scattered throughout about 13 states, from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast, including the District of Columbia and Los Angeles, California. It was one of the largest African-American insurance companies in the United States. And they ultimately closed around 2001. And so just to give you a little bit of history of the building in terms of our involvement in it, and we actually purchased the building in 2006, and it had been vacant for about 3 or 4 years at that time. But we recognized it had good bones. It has it's a poured concrete structure, so that was definitely favorable. And the limestone facades were in decent shape. Again, the motif, Egyptian Revival, was intentional in terms of the African connection for this African-American owned business. It's about 33,000 square feet, 11,000 square feet per floor. And it housed the offices of the Universal Life Insurance Company, which locally had about 200 employees at any given time. This was a place of community. The lower level had a large cafeteria when the building opened, and it became a hub for a lot of social events and organizing meetings for the civil rights movement, et cetera, as well as other community organizations, fraternities, et cetera. And so it really was not simply a building for the insurance company. It became a community building as well. And there's still people today who worked there who appreciate that we've actually redeveloped it. And we redeveloped it for our offices. As I mentioned, we purchased the building in 2006 and had the building listed on the National Register in 2007, put together our very neat development plan and pro forma, et cetera, and we were ready to go. And then in 2008, we experienced the Great Recession. And so that was not just a hiccup, but it caused us to have to put the project on pause for a number of years. And through many fits and starts, if you will, ultimately in 2015, we applied for and were successful at getting an allocation of qualified energy conservation bonds, QECBs. And that really started the momentum for us to get the project developed. The city of Memphis subsequently provided an allocation of funds. We also were able to secure historic tax credits, and we partnered with the Downtown Memphis Commission for their district development financing. And so, and the city of Memphis actually made a decision to locate their Office of Business Diversity and Development in this, in our structure. And so that really set in motion the redevelopment of the building from a financial standpoint. It was always a vision, and everyone that we spoke with and interacted with understood the vision, but it took a while to really to get all of the pieces to come together for the redevelopment. And our offices are also located inside this building. And that's very important to me. It's in as much as McKissick & McKissick was the original designer of the structure, and now our offices are there, but also really even carrying on the legacy of the founders, J.E. Walker and A.W. Willis. They were not only entrepreneurs, but they were community minded. They provided educational facilities, developed educational facilities, developed affordable housing, et cetera, and launched many entrepreneurs from this place. And that's also what's actually going on right now in the building. And so it's really a continuation of that legacy of community. Just a few before photographs, and you can see the shape the building was in prior to our development. And then a couple of photos of what it's like now. And part of what I really like in terms of, I do have a passion for preservation, but also adaptive reuse. And I really enjoy the juxtaposition of the contemporary and the historic. And that's what we try to do. Our corridors really have that historic feel. And then when you go into the offices, you'll see a much more contemporary look and feel. We also had to work with the U.S. Department of Interior in terms of maintaining all of the historic features. Even in the photograph on the top left, we were so pleased that much of the graphics, the lettering on the windows was intact. And so we preserved the majority of the doors and windows that had that kind of gold leaf paint on it. And so we're really proud of that particular feature as well. And then just a graphic of the founders and then their operating realm. So DC, Virginia, Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, et cetera, Texas and California. And some historic photographs of their staff during one of their events as well. Additionally, they were forward-looking, although it was founded by men and headed by men for a good while, but also what they promoted Patricia Walker Shaw to lead the company. And so it was she was one of the first CEOs, if you will, women CEOs in that insurance industry.
Wow.
Yeah. But also we talk about community. You also have to talk about connectivity.
Right.
And one of the projects that we've been involved with for a number of years, which is coming to fruition now, still in progress, though there are some physical aspects of this particular project, and that is the Memphis Heritage Trail, cultural heritage tourism. And so working with the Middle Tennessee State University Center for Historic Preservation, they developed an exhibit, and then the idea of this was to have, and heritage tourism, of course, is a major plus for any city or town that actually takes time to recognize their history. Others appreciate it. Robert Church Park. Robert Church was actually an African-American Memphian who became a millionaire not long after the Civil War. And as a matter of fact, his daughter, some may recognize her name, who ultimately lived in the District of Columbia, Mary Church Terrell, was one of the founding members of the NAACP. And one unique thing about Robert Church is that Memphis had an epidemic of yellow fever, and the city itself actually was going bankrupt, or was going to go bankrupt and go into receivership. And Robert R. Church actually bailed out, if you will, by purchasing the bonds that helped save the city of Memphis from going into receivership. And so this trail highlights many of the historic sites in Memphis, and particularly African Americans. And I wanted to just highlight Robert R. Church in this particular slide. And then the National Civil Rights Museum. This is, I would say, in my mind, it's my seminal work. And I say that in that it has become not only a project that is a period, if you will, from a grammatical standpoint, but it is a comma. It continues. And I say that in that I moved to Memphis in 1989, working for McKissick & McKissick, specifically to work on this particular project, which opened a couple of years later in 1991. That was the reason that I moved to Memphis, Tennessee. And I've been an architect on each subsequent development for the Civil Rights Museum. On Main Street, there's a building that's now part of this campus, the Young and Mora building, where James Earl Ray, the one accused of the assassination of Martin Luther King, and then this major renovation, which was done and completed in 2014, was architect on that. And we're now working on yet another project. And so I've been in Memphis about since 1989, 32 years. And I've been working on the National Civil Rights Museum that whole time. So, so it's kind of a career type project for me, and certainly positively. And the impact on our community of this building and what it means and the programming here is immense. The courtyard is a meeting place. The view of the courtyard there, it is a meeting place, a gathering place, a place of protest, a place of voices, a place of music, a place of food. It has really become one of those nodes in the city of Memphis from a community standpoint. Of course, this is a place that was where Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. You'll see the wreath on the right side there, outside of room 306. But for a number of years, from 1968 until this building was actually converted to the Civil Rights Museum, it really it had a rough time. And then, but this redevelopment focused not only on this tragedy, if you will, and all of the ills of segregation and oppression, et cetera, but it also focused on the triumphs, and that is, how does a people overcome those difficulties and triumphs, and then how do you create a sense of community, in the aftermath of such tragedies and such oppression, and how do you build community? And this, particularly this renovation, focused on not just the tragedy, but the triumph and the rebuilding of community, and and really encourages all who come to continue that struggle for towards if you will, a more perfect union,
Right.
not just these United States, but across the world.
Across the world. Yeah. This is really fantastic one. I mean, you were talking about working on this from 1989 to 32 years later. It's
Yes,
definitely, we all in architecture, as architects or designers, we all aspire for that legacy of, you know, work that is relevant to our zeitgeist. And I think what you have accomplished here with your continuing involvement with such an historic site, not just for the United States, but internationally,
yes,
as a milestone in the civil rights movement, as a tragic milestone, but now being used to remind all of us how important it is. So, I mean, I really want to congratulate you on. I was really looking forward to seeing this project, and I want to congratulate you on your work on this. And I just want to put up a little quick reminder to the audience. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A.
thank you, certainly. And I do want to just, this particular photograph is of the main lobby of the Civil Rights Museum. And the sculpture there was actually done by a Texan, Caucasian. He was selected from the many entries when the building actually opened in 1991. And the title of the sculpture is "Movement to Overcome." And um, you see there those striations and variegations there. Um, those are people climbing the mountain, and and so even it really became the catalyst and the our design imperative every step of the way on this renovation. And even as you go through the entire exhibit experience, you're constantly climbing, you're constantly moving up, you're constantly moving to the next level. And so that even when we may get um, bogged down from a design standpoint, because it was a very large team, exhibit designers, scholars, etc., we would always come back. What is our overarching theme? Movement to overcome. And so that really became our inspiration and our rallying cry. And just a couple of the exhibits. And of course, one certainly, so many are familiar with the Montgomery bus boycott. But the focus here, and that I like, was not just on Rosa Parks, but all of those unnamed individuals from the community who sacrificed and put themselves on the line so that others might have a better life. All right, and some of you may be familiar with the Stax record label. If not, you're certainly familiar with Otis Redding and the Staple Singers and so many others, Booker T and the MGs, Sam and Dave, et cetera, who recorded on this particular label. This is a community project. This recording studio was originally constructed in the south of Memphis community, now affectionately known as Soulsville, USA. It is not simply a reconstruction of that studio. It does actually have a working studio where I think Justin Timberlake recently recorded a song that was played at the inauguration of Joe Biden. But there's also a music academy as well, the Stax Music Academy. So Again, this is right in the neighborhood, right? Just immediately to the rear of the project is, just single family houses. Across the way are some commercial developments, and then to the right and left, single family houses. And so it was always a neighborhood type project, community project, and many of the recording artists actually came out of this particular neighborhood. And so the idea there, it focuses on the legacy of African American music, from gospel, even country, soul, R&B, jazz, etc. This particular project is Teach for America. It is housed, it's actually an interior redevelopment. It is housed in the Sears Crosstown Concourse, which was one of the large distribution centers for Sears and Roebuck company, and it houses the offices of Teach for America, Memphis location. And the design really was born out of the connectivity, and it really, as Teach for America's part of their principles is that of community and coming together. And it was challenging in that the space that you see here, their offices, is roughly half of the space that they were using initially. And so, but the idea of community, allowing concepts like hoteling, et cetera, they were able to consolidate this. And again, that juxtaposition of the historic and the contemporary is one of the themes that we use prominently in this. The mural in the back is actually a local African American artist, Jamon Bullard, and he actually has several murals in this particular development. And so the use of the space, the multi-purpose uses of spaces, opening onto each other, et cetera, was one of the areas that allowed us to consolidate their spaces. And so rather than having a dedicated space for this or that, every space is multi-use. In fact, there's actually only one actual office in this entire project. Every other space is open to the teachers that are part of the Teach for America Memphis. Memphis Business Academy for a local charter school, Memphis Business Academy. This actually, this project won a couple of awards. It's a pre-engineered metal building for one of our local charter schools. And part of this was opening to community. It's actually, if you see in the background, that concrete wall with a stripe on it, that's actually a Kmart. And so this is actually on the site of a former shopping center, and the Kmart is now being developed into some additional instructional spaces as well. So adaptive reuse in this particular new building, spurring community. And this is in the North Memphis, the Fraser community, one of the most under-resourced communities in Memphis. And so to have this development for education has been a major plus for that particular community.
There's one question from the audience, and I have another one. Do you think COVID-19 will change the way you approach utilizing architecture to impact the community? In other words, what are the implications as we go forward over the next couple of years and later on pandemics impacting your approach to architecture, especially when you're working with the community?
Yes, COVID-19 certainly will impact us and is impacting us. Some of our current designs, we're looking at not simply ways of having additional air changes, more fresh air, if you will, but sustainability, I think, will include different methods of ensuring that buildings are not just, quote, healthy buildings, but provide an additional amount of fresh air. I also think ultimately that the workplace itself will change somewhat on a permanent in some way, semi-permanent perhaps, and possibly permanent in other ways. Our own firm, we're not only socially distancing in that we reduced the amount of space or the number of our employees, rather, staff members by half in terms of those who may come and work in the building so that we can maintain social distance. And then we, like many other firms and businesses, had to figure out this, quote, distributed workforce. And so ultimately with a distributed workforce, perhaps, and it certainly remains to be seen in terms of what that near term and long term effect will be. But I think that is going to be included in the model for many businesses, which ultimately will affect even the amount of space within, particularly, say, an office building is actually needed. And we don't know what that future will hold, but it definitely will have is having an impact even now. One of the projects we're doing is a YMCA, and so we were able to reduce the actual amount of space that they needed, and even in their programming, they're changing how they actually will use that facility.
So, looking into the future, right, which is what we're doing right now with this whole figuring out what it's going to be like after COVID. I want to ask you, what is that one dream project that you are still waiting to start, that you look forward to working on?
Wow. My hometown, Clarksville, Mississippi, I'm looking forward to developing quality, affordable housing there in the city of Clarksdale, as well as community buildings. My father was a community person, and when I was growing up, he actually was one of the organizers of what we called back then a neighborhood center. And it truly was. There was skating, there was bowling, there was various recreational activities, and the whole cross section of the community met there. And so that's one of the projects that I really look forward to as I can move to help not only be the architect of that particular project, but also be one of the developers. And so that is beginning to help shape the community as well, with the input and buy-in and empowerment of the community. And so that neighborhood center for Clarksville, Mississippi is what I'm looking forward to.
That's fantastic. Well, we wish you all the best for that. If there's anything we can do in terms of raising awareness or talking about it, please keep us posted. I really look forward to seeing how your continuing involvement with the community translates into projects that are clearly close to your heart, part of your upbringing, part of where you come from. And, I think it's going to be a fascinating journey in the coming years. And
Certainly.
yeah, and on that note, I wish we had another at least half an hour, and hopefully we'll do this again in the future, where I really want to
Certainly.
more about your projects. But we covered quite a few today, and I thank you for your time, Juan. It was fantastic.
It's been my pleasure.
And hope to have you back here sometime soon. Yeah.
All right. We look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And on that note, we will wrap up our session for today. Next week, AWA Agora will be partnering with Soul Studio to invite one of the most innovative healers, person who works in healing technologies. He's a doctor from southern Siberia, Dr. Arjan Shurzhakov. He's going to be here talking to us about life supportive technologies for the future. So all of you who are interested in their own health and wellness, their family's health and wellness, their community's health and wellness, come hear his talk on what he does with light, sound, color, he'll tell you all about it. He's a fascinating and fantastic speaker, very knowledgeable, and we are very fortunate to host him next week. So hopefully you'll join us next Thursday, same time, 11 at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. And thank you all for attending. Thank you all for supporting us in subscribing to our YouTube channel, and we will continue through COVID and after COVID in getting you really amazing speakers from all over the world. Please continue to visit us and spend time with us, and we'll see you next week, next Thursday. Thanks. Bye.